Welcome everyone to Couch Potato Diary. Happy Monday. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in today. All right, looks like my light behind me is not going to work, so we're just going to get Spotlight. Who was that? Aiden English. Spotlight, please. Hey, Deeds, how's it going? Coming up on the show today, going to be looking at the news of the day from the Calgary Flames, and then getting into everything that happened in the NFL. Going to be getting into WWE Bad Blood, a little bit of UFC. Admittedly, I didn't see the show, so just saw some clips and whatever like that. So not going to be the most in-depth breakdown today. Going to be doing a little bit more on that as the week goes along. NBA preview stuff continuing as well, with a little bit of CFL talk mixed in. So going to be a very, very busy show. As always, thank you guys so much for hanging out today. But let's start with the Flames news of the day and the weekend. So, first of all, I guess the stuff that's happening most recently is that Igor Sharangovich is going to be placed on IR, and I believe the diagnosis or prognosis or whatever the correct osis is week to week. I believe that's what we're saying. Yes, week to week with a lower body injury sustained in Friday's preseason finale. He is now on injured reserve. That tweet coming from one Pat Steinberg, so pretty reliable, I would say. And so like initially, and as Toxic pointed out in the chat here before we really got rocking and rolling today, that sucks. Like the main. The main takeaway from it is that this sucks. This is a kid who was coming off of so easily the best year of his career and a breakout, and now he's going into a new contract and doing all of these things and hurt. And like we have just seen so many examples where an injury in the preseason, even just the last one, when you don't get to start the year on time and you're making your season debut November, December time, it takes a little bit of time for you to get up. And I'm not going to say, well, going to be a lost season for Sharangovich because he's still a talented kid, but it just takes so long to really get that ramping up. And so that gets a little bit frustrating and just a little bit demoralizing. And so you feel bad for the kid who gets hurt in a preseason game. Again, a reminder, the 8th preseason game. So just quick sidebar on this whole thing. Preseason, simply too long. We don't need that much preseason. We don't want that much preseason. Stop with having that much preseason. So there's that. A. B, now from a Flames standpoint, and as Toxic was saying in the chat here again, this makes the Pelche waiver thing that much more of a head scratcher. Those, again, his exact words in the chat. And I would tend to agree. If you saw this coming and you knew this was coming, this was now an opportunity for you to not have to deal with that. And just, okay, well, this is the thing that has now allowed us to just not have to worry about it. So, boom, there we go. Pelche gets to not go on waivers and potentially not get claimed and go over to the Montreal Canadiens or whoever that may be. And so like this felt like a really unfortunate one, but this felt like a kind of get out of jail free card where you had this decision. It's like, oh, where are we going to fit him in? Now it's okay. Well, now he fits. There we go. It works. It worked out perfectly for us. We now didn't have to give up this kid on the waiver wire and potentially give up a former first round pick for literally exactly nothing. And so that is why I don't get it. And so we should be getting, I think, kind of any moment now, the word on all the waiver claims and all of those things. Now, there was a ton of them. And so there's, all of that going on and everything like that. So we will wait and see. We will react together. But the Sharangovich injury should have just, taken care of that whole thing. So I don't understand it. So now that it hasn't, now that we have kind of accepted the insanity of the situation and the frustration of the situation and the, okay, well, now that we have just assessed and dealt with it and moved on, we can now figure out what do they do now, because we can't just harp this whole time on, well, they should have done this, well, they should have done that, well, they should have done this, well, they should have done that, and it's like, okay, well, they didn't, so what are we gonna do now? And the thing that we do now, I think, and we'll see, because again, logic hasn't entered into all of this, is I would imagine this is the Coronado spot that everyone was looking for. This was, and like Toxic said, Pelche, even if he doesn't get claimed, or even though he was on waivers, he would still be a guy that, you would think like, okay, this guy can fill in this spot, right? And like that, there's, I think, an easy-ish path forward to it, where you just straight line Pelche goes into that spot, and it's Pelche, Kadri, and Kuzmenko, and you just roll with that. You can certainly, I think, justify that pretty clearly. Or I think another one would be put Pelche with Backlund and Coleman, and again, I know then there's a bit of a assessment issue because everyone looks good with those guys, but you put him there, and you put Zari with Kadri, who he's obviously comfortable with, and have that kind of continue on. So I think that there was a way to do that as well, and have Pelts fit. So that's why, like, again, the roster construction-wise, it fits. But I do think, like, you were looking for a spot in the top 6 for Matt Coronado. There it is. There's his spot. He balled out in the preseason again, and I think has now an opportunity to go out and really show what he can do and be this guy now who, like, this is someone who we think is going to be this top 6 goal scorer for this team for years and years and years and years and years to come. Let him be that now. Let him go out and do that. So this one seems like the obvious one to me anyway, is that this is where Coronado kind of slots in. And maybe there's a waiver roster thing that I'm unfamiliar with, but that just seems like the easiest solution. Again, you don't like when injuries pop up, especially to someone who is a young player and you think is at least going to be a piece of something going forward with this group. But it does provide an opportunity, and hopefully now this is an opportunity that someone takes full advantage of. In the chat, Toxic again saying, yeah, if he doesn't get claimed, does he just stay on the team? Because it, like we just laid it out, that definitely could work for sure. Deeds, short of they thought Sharky was going to be day to day, or they were just trying to get Pelts through while GMs were scrambling to get their roster set. And that is, I think, a part of this as well, is that there are like the Flames are in a roster crunch. That is why they put everyone on waivers. So now everyone else is on a roster crunch. And so they, had to put everyone on waivers. So no one really has the room to just throw this kid on. But the one thing I kept coming back to in this whole situation is if someone else did this, and maybe there have, and to be honest, I didn't go through the whole list. Like, it was a lot. But if someone else put a former first-round pick who has kind of been hindered by injuries mainly, and that has, I think, limited things down to inconsistent playing time, which has brought inconsistent results. Like, you can very easily see how this is someone who hasn't been utilized. And so if anyone else did this and put that player on waivers, we would want the Flames to claim them and just find a spot for them. And this is the spot where you come in, and now all of these opportunities are here, and we can provide you with those. So that's why it made no sense to me to then give up the exact type of player that everyone thinks you should be looking for at this time. And so that is why I just simply do not get this whole thing. All right, I really thought that waivers would have been posted by now, or any of that sort of thing. I'm pretty sure it was, oh no, it's noon Mountain Time. I'm thinking noon Eastern Time. Okay, so we're not going to get it right now. We'll probably, like, we're doing a video game stream later. It's going to be another Flames one. So we'll talk all about what happens when we do the video game coming up at 2 o'clock today back here on the channel. So now let's transition into the rest of the sporty world. There is still going to be some Flames content coming up here on this channel in the next little bit. Again, a reminder, Game Over Calgary is, yeah, we can sell for a couple of hours. Look, there's a real chance this show might still be going on at that point. This is going to be a long one again today. But I don't think that we're going to be stalling for that long. So I just had a bit of a, internal clock thing. One sec for the water. But yeah, so messed that up in my brain a little bit, but we got it back on track and we're good. So now let's go into the world of the National Football League, as it was another very, very busy weekend in the NFL. And I think we're learning some stuff now as we get into basically the finale of week 5 in the National Football League. Week 5 in the NFL is almost done with just one game left tonight. The Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Saints of New Orleans. So obviously we will not be breaking that game down. But let's run through what we learned from the NFL schedule this week. And we will start very early out in London, England, as the Jets took on the Minnesota Vikings. And again, the Vikings continue to show their for realness. And a lot of people were wondering, what would Sam Darnold do when there's some pushback and when there is some resistance to what he is actually putting out there? How will he handle it? Because everything has kind of been smooth sailing so far. And obviously there were some stumbles. This was not a perfect game from Sam Darnold, but it was good enough to get them the win. And I thought good enough to make you feel comfortable that this Vikings team is for real. They are a very well-coached football team. And Sam Darnold, with the weapons they have on offense, is enough to get out there and keep piling up these wins and keep being a threat in the NFC North and the NFC just in general. And the one thing that you really take from this is this defense is for real, for real. They are very well coached. Brian Flores has them absolutely rolling, and they are, I think, a real force to be reckoned with. And from a fantasy standpoint, as Deeds points out, needs a bit of help this week. Just 70 points, and you'll get there. I'm in the Vampire League. I'm needing 24 points from Shaheed tonight against Kansas City. So I'm hoping the Chiefs allow big days to secondary options really comes through in this game. So we'll see how that one ends up. But for the Vikings, from a fantasy standpoint, maybe you don't really want to play them. The one guy who has a good game this week is Garrett Wilson with 105 yards through the air. The running game was completely shut down, and Aaron Rodgers did not have a good football game. And again, this is going up against a good defense. And so it is weird to say, hey, this defense is legit, that's awesome, but also you cannot have that bad of a day against this defense. It's weird to say both of those things, but for Aaron Rodgers, it needs to be better, because this was not a move. Bringing Aaron Rodgers in for this roster a couple of years ago, this was not a move to, you know what, let's squeak into the playoffs and let's see what happens. This was a move to become contenders to win the division, contenders to get home playoff games, and contenders to win the Super Bowl. This does not look like a Super Bowl team right now, and he is not executing at a Super Bowl caliber, which, by the way, told you. But you look at the 2 wins they have this year. It's the Titans, who gave it to them, and it's the Patriots, who suck, and it was on Thursday night, and it was the first time Mayo was coaching on a Thursday night, so he did not have his team ready for that game. Other than that, anytime this team has faced anything remotely close to a challenge, it has failed. And we talked last week about how Aaron Rodgers did a good job in holding his team accountable. Well, now it's time to hold him accountable. He was not good enough to win this football game. 3 interceptions is unacceptable, and the missed passes that they had when there were opportunities to come back in this game just are not good enough. And you can credit Minnesota's defense for doing that to them. And they did a really good job of just shutting that down. I just think that for the Jets, there is a concern now that basically everything we talked about in the preseason is going to be right. That he is just not the guy to elevate this group. And honestly, the coach maybe isn't that guy. either. Again, we're not going to run through every game. Dolphins-Patriots was damn near unwatchable. The Panthers have come crashing back down to earth, and the Bears are not this good. Toxic in the chat. I didn't think I was going to win this week in the Vampire League. Just put some scraps together. That's basically where we're at right now. Is scrap time with the bye weeks coming up and all of those sorts of things. How was it looking for you, or how is it looking for you here this week, Toxic? Oh yeah, huge day. So yeah, you're definitely gonna win. Who was it that balled out? Oh, Chase. Well, that will help. Yeah, that's going to help get the job done in that league for sure. The Colts against Jacksonville. This was one where you can look at both of these teams and you can say, hey, you know what? Positives to take from this. But also you can look at both these teams and go, you know what? Real negatives to take from this. Walt Grizzly, how many years of choking do you give a head coach before you fire him? This is on the Robert Salah one, but I think you can also very much account it to Doug Peterson. Now, they get the win here, so it's weird to talk about firing a coach off of a win, but I think in both cases, Walt, and again, I'm assuming we're talking about Salah here mainly, I think time is certainly running out. Also, thank you for joining, Walt. Appreciate it. Just in general, not Salah or Peterson. Okay. Apologies for guessing wrong on that. But yeah, I do think that sometimes the blame the coach thing is a bit too quick, and you have a lot of situations where players become almost a little invincible, and that leads to some not great situations. But also, there are way too many occasions where coaches get too long of a leash. Walt talking about Kyle Shanahan. Okay, let's talk about Kyle Shanahan, because again, yeah, this is a common theme. And now, part of it for Shanny this week is his kicker got hurt. And so you didn't have options to kick field goals and stuff like that. But still, the very well thought of, vaunted Kyle Shanahan offensive system should be able to put up more than 23 points against the Arizona Cardinals with me kicking field goals. This Arizona, we've talked about them. They are improved. They shouldn't be that improved that they are holding this team to just 23 points. They were able to, it seemed like they were able to move the ball on them, but and it's not even like the defense didn't play well. Like holding Arizona to 24 points, you feel like you should be able to win that football game based off of how that Arizona defense can play. And so I don't think Kyle Shanahan gets, like, I don't think he is even on the hot seat there. Injuries have been coming up. Now this offense is, for the most part, pretty healthy. But there is certainly a pattern there, right? Where it is late game situations don't go well. And you can go all the way back to 28-3 against the Patriots, where he was the offensive coordinator and they kept like passing it for some reason and not running the clock out. He is very, very bad at clock management and letting those things kind of wind down. And I do think you look at like, I do think he's a smart offensive mind. I don't think there's any denying that. But I also do think that, he has very exceptional players all over his roster. And I think the whole, oh my God, he's doing this with Brock Purdy, this is insane. I think we're seeing Brock Purdy's actually a pretty good quarterback. And maybe there is a chicken and egg situation, and he has done a good job of developing this. But there is, I think, no denying that this is a coach who struggles when games are close and struggles in situations where his team has opportunities to put games away and it doesn't work. And yeah, I think we are at a point now with Kyle Shanahan where you can't say anything other than he chokes in big, close, late game situations. And like, it's not his fault the pass gets deflected and intercepted, but it is, I think, his offense's fault that it got to that point. And even you look back last week when they're kicking the crap out of the Patriots, a lot of drives that just like didn't end the way that they needed to. He's been there since, God, it doesn't feel like it's been 7 years, but I guess, hey, it's been there since 2017 and chokes regularly. Like the Rams game is a perfect example, right? Like they have already choked this season, and this is one that they let get away. And now when you look at the NFC West, like yes, the Seahawks have a bit of a surprising result yesterday, but the 49ers are in third in this division right now. And I don't think, as much as we talked about how Arizona's defense shouldn't be one that is overly threatening, I don't think that they are like that much better suited to jump over an Arizona or a Seattle or anyone like that. Like I think that they are legitimately in some trouble in this division. And I guess, yeah, to that point, the offense only put up 16 against the Cardinals because there was the defensive touchdown on there as well, or defensive plays anyway that stood up. So no, this is it is a weird spot, and it is very frustrating for the 49ers because when and Walt, I know you are new to the channel, and again, thank you, but this is a team that I am constantly putting on my most talented teams in the NFL list when we do those rankings in the preseason. There is so much talent on this football team, and when you see how wide open the NFC kind of should be, they should be lapping everybody. And I do think that, again, to your point, when you look at the 49ers schedule this year, you can put quite a bit of the blame at the feet of the head coach. So I think it's honestly, it's not the direction I thought I was going to go with this, Walt, but it is a good kind of thought here. You know, like, you look at the losses that they had. They lose this game by 1 to Arizona. So it is, again, bad late game situations and not being able to adjust and make the plays properly. And then they lose to the Rams 27-24 in a game where, again, you're winning by a lot, poor clock management, can't put the game away. You lose to the Minnesota Vikings 23-17. Now we are seeing that Vikings win, or that Vikings loss, doesn't look quite as bad as time goes on, because the Vikings look like they are legit. But still, this is a close game that they were unable to get across the finish line. And so, yes, you can draw up all the great plays and all of these things that you want, but there is more to coaching than just being able to draw up the good plays that get some guys open sometimes. It is about clock management. It is about late game situations and being able to get the job done. And we saw a couple of coaches kind of fail in those situations this week, but this is, to Walt's point, this is a pattern in San Francisco that has been going on for years and years and years, and multiple Super Bowls. And yes, NFC Championship game against the Los Angeles Rams as well. He is great for neutral observers because it's always interesting, and he is always going for these things that he shouldn't be going for and doing these things that maybe he shouldn't be doing and all of that. But at the end of the day, from a franchise standpoint, I mean, look, as a Raider fan, would I rather him than Antonio Pierce right now? Yeah, I would. And I would figure out the late game stuff later. But when you have a team that is in its championship window, and like, it's going to get much more expensive to have this team very quickly. Because Brock Purdy, that whole, you get a quarterback on a round 7 contract, that's going away very quickly. And I think you are starting to see with how the IU process went down and all of that, how difficult it's going to be to kind of put all of those pieces into place. And I do think that there's probably a little bit of, there should be anyway, a little bit of pressure and a lot of the blame on Kyle Shanahan for what has gone on in San Francisco. So no, it is a great point out there, Walt. But again, to kind of tie it back to the game we were talking about before, for Doug Peterson, now he has his Super Bowl with the Philly, and all of that. But like, this was a game that shouldn't have been close for Jacksonville. They were dominating early, and they just kept letting Indy get back into this game. And offensively, like, they were great. Like, Trevor Lawrence had one of his better games of the year so far, and they just couldn't get a stop. And that's not something that's been usual for this defense so far this year. And so again, now it looks at Doug Peterson, where you finally got your first win, but even this one wasn't as convincing as it needed to be. And for the Colts, the offense kept putting up some points and kept them in there. And Alec Pierce is making a wild catch after wild catch. How are we not getting a stop against this team that has struggled so much on the offensive side so far with Trevor Lawrence? Yeah, and Walt, I would say he has been the problem in Jacksonville. He hasn't been good enough. He was better in this game, and the Colts just could not stop it at all. So it's one of those ones where Jacksonville, all right, you put up 37 points, you never quit, and you won. That's great. You probably needed to put that one away a while ago, though, right? And for the Colts, it's like, yeah, you battled back, you almost got there. Probably shouldn't be falling behind by that much and having that much trouble with Jacksonville, right? So this is one of those games that I think kind of just drove home how mid both of these teams really actually are. Speaking of poor clock management, the Buffalo Bills and the Houston Texans. The Texans come away with a 23-20 win. And they lose Nico Collins in this game, and at that point, the offense does kind of stall out a little bit. And so I do think some of the talk of, oh, wow, they have 3 number ones. Like, you know what? I think Tank Dell is really good. I think he's a really good number 2. And at this point, I think Stephon Diggs is kind of appropriately set as a number 3. But to lose Nico Collins, obviously they are struggling running the football right now, and that was a kind of a theme again in this game. They tried to get Ogunbowale going, didn't feel like he really was. Buffalo was able to get back into this one, and then it felt like it had kind of been cost, or they kind of were cost, as Stroud tries and thinks Schultz is going to go out toward the sideline and just misses him, and they called it grounding, which I thought was kind of insane, because that is a miscommunication that happens all the time. And so I thought you could explain away that one pretty easily, keep them in field goal range, and they still get the field goal to give them the lead. Instead, they have to punt it, and Buffalo is pinned down at their 2. And they take a shot on first down, and like, you know what? Give it a go. Like, just let fly the Hogs of War or whatever it is, and just let them go and see if you can get a touchdown or a big play out of it to get you into field goal range. When you don't, then you just, like, pound the ball into the offensive line a couple of times and go to overtime. Like, that's basically what it should be. And for them to then punt the ball and with any kind of return allow the Texans to get into field goal range and win that game is some very poor management. And again, to kind of go with the whole theme of this, with what Walt was bringing up earlier with Shanahan, Sean McDermott has done a lot of very good things for this franchise that haven't happened in a really long time. But I think we are getting to the point now where we have seen that there is a ceiling on this guy, and that he doesn't necessarily help them get over the top with this roster. And I think that there was a real miss with how they handled that whole game. Walt, I'm not surprised that you would be a Saleh fan, coming from being the defensive guy out in San Francisco and the energy and everything that he brought there. But I just think, again, when you look at how late game situations have gone with the Jets and how this roster has kind of not really set everything up and not really advanced, I think that there are some major flaws in his game that need to be ironed out. Doesn't mean they won't be, but I don't think he is helping the Jets. I will say that much. Baltimore against Cincinnati, this game was another absolute wild one, and a real knock against people who think that Lamar Jackson can't win the big one and can't really get going, because he was phenomenal in this game. Setting up some of those plays that he did. Obviously, Derrick Henry finally gets rolling on the outside. They did a really good job of getting him outside, taking on those defensive backs, and just powering forward through that. I thought he was great, and they stepped up in a big-time way. But it's something we talked about a little bit. The defense continues to be something that you really worry about in Baltimore, because they got picked apart in this game, and it was poor tackling on Jamar Chase, who helps Toxic's fantasy team, and it was an inability to stop anything really at any point. And then down in the red zone, Joe Burrow was just picking them apart. So you feel a whole lot better about Cincinnati coming out of this one, and it's still, you feel good about Baltimore, but you don't feel great about it because of that defense. And yeah, Walt, back on the Bills. The problem is they refused to get a wide receiver for Allen. I mean, this year they did. He had a pretty good one for a while in Stephon Diggs. But yes, this year they have tried for it. And like, I think Keon Coleman, there's actually something there. But there should have been at least somewhat of a veteran backup plan, aside from Curtis Samuel as the option once you move on from Stephon Diggs. Like, even if it is just a whatever. No, and I'm not questioning that. Like, Diggs Diva lost them a playoff game for sure. He also got them to a lot of them. Like, he was a talented receiver. And so there is a balance that you need to have, but I do think that they still they gave him that for a bit. But now they are counting on him to try to elevate around and do kind of the Tom Brady thing where, all right, and I mean, Brady was a different situation. He wasn't making as much money, but, or as much of the cap. But for Allen, They are now asking him, like, we are paying you a ton. We need to see you elevate the guys around you. And I think he's done that with a couple, but like we know what Curtis Samuel is. There isn't this mystical thing that he or MVS are going to find at this point in their careers. So, I mean, yeah, like Davante Adams would make this team a Super Bowl threat, I think. And that would be one of the landing spots for him, for sure. But they are like, the Chargers kind of did the same thing, where it's like we have a quarterback that we view as a franchise quarterback, and we now have to pay him as a franchise quarterback. So he has to be a franchise quarterback and make the weapons around him better because we can't afford to bring one of those in. But I do think there are a lot of veteran receivers that you could have brought in that weren't Curtis Samuel or MVS. That maybe would have helped. So much for my Washington might come back down to earth thing. Hey, they were phenomenal again. And the Browns, it's so bad there. They took 2 timeouts on goal-to-go situations and ended up kicking field goals. Like, Deshaun Watson is just the drizzling shits and is so bad and has just basically given it all up. He'll start games and it's great, and then as it goes on, he gets less and less interested in how that game is going. Raiders, Broncos. Broncos are looking a little bit more for real, and a game against the Raiders isn't going to drive that home, but this defense does look legit, and Bo Nix, albeit against a not great defense, has shown that there is at least a bit of maturing going on in his game as this season progresses. They're not like a threat to, I don't even think, make the playoffs, quite frankly. But I do think they're going to beat some bad teams, which they did this week. For the Raiders, the Gardner Minshew thing is just, it's not working. And now all eyes, as was pointed out in here before, all eyes certainly go to Davante Adams and seeing what the Raiders can get for him. Because again, as we kind of addressed last week, this team has some pass catching options. Like Jacoby Myers, if he's your number 1 wide receiver, you're not winning Super Bowls, but he's fine. And they have guys like Tucker who I think are interesting, and Bowers is a beast. So those are all good players that they can go out and pick up some yards and actually help you out. You don't have a quarterback though. Minshew, it's the league has figured him out. And I don't think Aiden O'Connell is any great shakes at all. Walt, on the Commanders, Browns, Cardinals, Bengals, and Giants. I'm still waiting for Washington to play a decent team. I would say Cardinals are a decent team, and I would say the Bengals are a decent team as well. They haven't played the tippity top of their schedule yet. Coming up, like the Ravens game this weekend is going to be an interesting test. But I mean, and this is something I kind of did last year. We were looking at a few teams. It's like, all right, well, who have they beat? Who have they beat? Who have they beat? Who's there to beat? Like, if we are not counting the Cardinals and the Bengals as decent teams, then our bar for decent teams is kind of only cleared by like 4 or 5, right? Like, let's look at the Commanders' schedule the rest of the way. Ravens, I would put in that as a good team. Panthers, no. Bears, no. Giants, no. Steelers, yes. Eagles, yes. Cowboys, I wouldn't. Titans, no. Saints, defense probably, but like that is a test for them offensively. Eagles, yes. Falcons, borderline. Okay, and then if we're saying Eagles, no, then they're not going to play a decent team, and that's where we're at in this league right now, and that is kind of a bigger picture thing, and it's one of the things we talked about last year with a few of these teams, where it's well, who have they beat? Who have they beat? That there isn't anyone to beat. Like, there isn't what would you consider a good win in the NFL these days? Because there are only a handful of teams who look like they have it all together. The rest of them, there are some holes on teams. Like, you run through the entirety of the league right now. Kansas City, offense doesn't look super explosive. Minnesota, it's Sam Darnold. How can we possibly trust that? The Houston Texans, yeah, they're 4-1. The offense has looked good in exactly one of those games. Washington is who we are talking about, and the defense is supposed to be abysmal. The Detroit Lions have finally got some things like pieced together here a little bit, but still, like, they didn't look fantastic in the first little bit. Atlanta, Kirk Cousins' leg could fly off at the end of every play. Baltimore, they have had some troubles in some weird games. They lost to the Raiders so far at different points this season. Buffalo, their defense is completely falling apart and is really banged up. Seattle looks like they should have a bunch of talent, but just got walked by the Giants and lost that game that they shouldn't have. The Steelers, defense looks really good, but the offense can only put up 17 points a game. And so you go on through. Every single team has a flaw right now. And so that is why the door is open for a team like a Washington to step through, for a team like an Arizona to step through and to take that. And why it is so frustrating, to Toxic's point in the chat, the Browns completely fumbled the bag with the Watson trade. They have one of the most talented defensive players the league has ever seen in on their defensive line right now. And they had Nick Chubb, and they have Amari Cooper, and now they have Jerry Jeudy, who kind of is what he is. And as far as tight ends go, David Njoku is a pretty good one. And so it feels like you should have this opportunity to just walk right through, because everything is so wide open in this NFL right now, and they just can't do it. And so that is where you get a lot of the desperation. Well, we'll just get a new quarterback, you get a new quarterback in. And it is an entire cycle that just feeds on itself. So yes, if they beat the Ravens, then I will give them that credit. But if they lose to Baltimore and then win 5 in a row, I'm going to have a hard time not giving them credit, because there's like 3 teams in the league that you can give teams credit for beating every single week. And when you don't play any of them, like, no, like, I am not saying go cash a Washington Super Bowl ticket right now, but I am saying that when we are looking at who's legit, the list isn't that big. And it's something that's been talked about around this league for a little bit now. And I thought yesterday was actually a really good day of football, but it's kind of the first that we've had. We've had some good games, but we have had some real duds, and scoring is so low in this league, and people are trying to figure out why that is. And honestly, this was something I was thinking of doing a little bit later in the week, but on a roll. So let's look at it. Why is this league offensively in the shape that it is in? Well, defenses get paid too, and teams have kind of figured out, like, okay, well, if we put 2 guys back there, it's going to make it a whole lot easier for us to defend. And so I think that there has been some defensive adjustments to the wild and craziness that was going on. And so that limited things. But I also think the NFL has done an abysmal job of hiring coaches in the last 5-10 years, where you have guys like Cliff Kingsbury didn't do a fucking thing to deserve that job as head coach. What's his name? Nathaniel Hackett. Oh, he's the offensive coordinator for Aaron Rodgers. Didn't do a thing to deserve that coaching job. And you just go on down the line with all these. Oh, Brandon Staley. Well, he's a defensive-minded guy. Okay, where was that defense ever? They did so bad at hiring these coaches year after year after year. It was anyone who had bought coffee for Kyle Shanahan was getting an offensive job. And so you are basically running an entire league off of like 3 offensive systems, whether it would be whatever McVay is doing, whatever Kyle Shanahan is doing, and then actually good offensive minds like Andy Reid who would adjust to things and stuff like that. And so when you have a league where you have everyone who is trying to do just like a bastard, yeah, right. But still, it was like, I guess I'm not saying, I should have explained that better. Like, yes, McVay comes off of the Shanahan tree, but then after that, anyone who worked with McVay, people were hiring off of, right? Like, oh, he was on McVay's staff as the offensive line coach, hired, right? Like that was the big thing. And so that's kind of where I was going at. Yes. And I do think McVay has kind of shifted things a little bit, but they aren't, to your point there, they aren't that different of systems. And that does kind of drive home a bit more of my point. If I'm a defensive coordinator right now, I don't have to figure out, okay, what do the Ravens do every week? That might be a bad example, I guess. But okay, what do the 49ers do every week? What do the Cardinals do every week? What do the Packers do every week? What do these guys do every week? You basically have to figure out like 3 or 4 offensive systems to shut down, and then you've covered most of the league. So you can just go through okay, let's go. Okay, we're playing Shanahan this week. All right, well, this worked in week 2 against them. We've also seen him, to your point, Walt, for 7 goddamn years in San Francisco, and I don't know if a whole lot has switched up, and now it's, oh my god, motion, and one guy moving on the line, which as a Canadian Football League fan is hilarious to me, but that's beside the point. You have like 3 or 4 things, and that's all you need to get figured out, and you can shut down like half of the league. And you do that 1 or 2 more times, and you've got the whole league figured out. And so we are hiring these guys who aren't qualified from systems that they are then taking, and they aren't doing the best of it. Aside from McVay, who has this boy wonder mind and can tell you anything that has ever happened in the sport of football ever. And so he has adjusted it and kind of tweaked it to make it his own. But aside from that, you're taking a lot of guys who aren't as smart as the dudes who came up with this in the first place and hoping that they can then replicate it. And so you are getting to defend against, with all due respect, dumbed down versions of these offenses on a week in, week out basis. So no shit that everyone is shutting down these offenses, because there's only 4 you have to worry about. And then the cherry on top is every goddamn year in the draft, what do we hear? Oh, well, this team needs a quarterback, so they're going to draft a quarterback in the first round. Okay. Does this quarterback have a first round grade on him? Well, no, but we're going to roll with him anyway. And so you are putting the fate of your franchise into the hands of someone who isn't qualified to be in that spot in the first place. And you are now hoping that they are going to play at that high of a level that you should be that they should be based on where you are drafting them. And so then you get mistakes of Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen. We can do this for hours talking about quarterbacks that didn't work, right? So you get these guys just because they play this one position. And like Bo Nix, no world was Bo Nix a top 15 pick in the NFL draft, except the Denver Broncos needed a quarterback, and he kind of looked like Drew Brees in a picture once, so we're taking him. Teams have just been falling over each other just to get the next best quarterback in the draft and not actually building their rosters up. And then to Walt's point, sometimes they're not even surrounding them with the right guys. It's just, here, fucking fix it, man, and go do it. And so you're putting underqualified quarterbacks in, again, dumbed down offenses and hoping that they can just fix everything, and then you get mad at them for not being able to fix anything at all. And and then you compound it by spending insane amounts of money on every one of these guys because you have to, because you don't want to go back into that vicious quarterback cycle that leads you to where the Raiders are, where it's Gardner Minshew and Aiden by God O'Connell running out there and trying to run your offense. So you just you either have to overpay for Dak Prescott, who hasn't done anything, to look like a $250 million or whatever the fuck it was quarterback, and you are now expecting him to be able to make everyone around you better. And that, like, he's never done that. He has never been that guy. He's been a fine quarterback, but he has never been well, you can give him a fucking quarter of your salary because he can go out and lift everyone up. You can do that to Mahomes because he's incredible. You can do it to Josh Allen because he's also a running back out there, and he can do a lot of those things. And Lamar Jackson is a unicorn, so he can do those things. You pay those guys. Joe Burrow, winner. Those types of things. But then you pay, and like, I think Jordan Love's going to be pretty good. You pay Jordan Love a gigantic contract off of one good season where he then threw a pick 6, and it was insane, the throw that he ended up doing. And so you put these guys in these positions that their talents just aren't there for. And you then wonder, okay, well, why is the league struggling? It's because you have wildly mismanaged almost every offense in the league. And yeah, like, Mahomes hasn't looked spectacular. I would suggest that a lot of it is based off of what's going on around him. I think if you gave him a Devontae Adams, all of a sudden, hey, he looks good again. I think he has done just enough to be able to win. And I think that's kind of the situation that they have been placed in. But I think, like, if you gave him Miami's offense, then they win a Super Bowl and are probably undefeated for several years in a row. Like, I think he is incredibly talented. They just didn't weren't able to put a roster around him because they paid him like a franchise quarterback. And I think he deserved that. And he is showing that he is good enough to at least get you to scrape by with the scraps that he is left with. But then you do the same for Justin Herbert, who's 500 in his career, and it's not going to work. Why would it work? And so it has just been incredible amounts of mismanagement for so long that has led this league to being in the offensive point, or into just the point in general where it is, to the point where we're looking at Washington's schedule. It's like, okay, maybe they haven't beat anyone, but they don't have anyone to beat because no one's anyone. Like the Steelers lose to the Cowboys last night. Is that a bad loss? Is it a good win for Dallas? I don't know, because everyone's the goddamn same. So anyway, that is the rant there. The one thing, because we were going to get to talk about the Raiders there. Walt saying Adams will never be in KC, but I think Cooper will be. We need to get Amari Cooper out of Cleveland ASAP. That's fair. On the Adams thing, I think you're right, and I think it's silly because, like, again, as a Raider fan, if they traded Devontae Adams to the Chiefs, we're going to be like, okay, well, now the Chiefs are better than the Raiders. Now, boy, now that's really tipped them over the top. We were neck and neck before, and now they've just blown right past us. No, if the Chiefs give you the best offer, take it. Get the most you can for your last good trade chip, unless you want to move Max Crosby, which please don't. But if you... Like, this is the big thing that you have, so get the most out of it, is what I would tell you. And no, like, I do think some of the Daniels hype, to your point, Walt, has gotten a little out of control a touch. But I do also think that he is quite talented. And I do think that this is a Commanders team that maybe we took for granted. Is this going to be a team that wins the Super Bowl? No. There's still a pretty good chance they don't even make the playoffs, just based off of how bad that defense is. But I think that they are beating even if they are just average defenses, they are beating them so thoroughly that I think you have to be impressed with what they are doing. Also, I do like Cleveland's defense hasn't really shown up, and I think everyone has just kind of quit. But in the 3 weeks before this game, you have they gave up 20 points, 21 points, 13 points. Like, this defense has played well. The team sucks, but the defense has played well, and I think that Washington should get at least some credit for what they did there to the Browns. Aside from that, like, there wasn't a whole lot else. Green Bay gets the win. It maybe wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be, but they still get a win. And then the Cowboys, in a delay, get a victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers. So but good stuff there with the rant about where the NFL is going and all of that. I had that one in the chamber for a little bit later on the week, but had to bring that one out now because of all the frustration around everything that has been going on in this league for the last little bit, and everyone being like, well, we're all looking for who's responsible here, right? So that has been on my mind for a little bit, as I think you could probably tell. Gonna hit the talking football thing one more time. Just have a couple of points here on the CFL before we get into some wrestling talk. The Canadian Football League is coming down to the final 3 weeks of the regular season, and for the first time since 1948, the province of Alberta will not be represented, as the Stampeders and Elks both eliminated this week. Edmonton, in their loss to Winnipeg, who are making statements right now. This is a couple blowout wins in a row, and we have said for a bit that they're winning games, but it's still not looking as impressive as it should. Now it is. This team is looking really scary offensively. This defense has always been really good, and they look like the most complete team in the Canadian Football League right now, and that is concerning that they are peaking at the right time and looking like the road to the Grey Cup is going to go through Winnipeg this season. They've won something like 8 in a row now, right? It is, I believe that is what the win streak is at this point. It's been a bunch in a row. That is certainly for sure. It's been a really impressive run. And of course the CFL website wouldn't have the actual, streak stats or anything like that. And so, coming into this week, it was 7 in a row. So yes, 8 in a row that Winnipeg has won now, coming off of this. And the last couple have been dominant as hell. And it is really, really scary for them. For the BC Lions, they needed a win like that. They eliminate the Stampeders. The offense gets them 32 points. It's still not perfect, but it is getting there. And you talk about scary teams. Like, the way that this offense can move with Rorik at quarterback makes them a team you would really have to worry about. But the fact that they... Right now, if the playoffs were to start today, they'd have to play 2 road games, one in Saskatchewan, one in Winnipeg, to be able to then host the Grey Cup, which would be pretty funny, is less than ideal. But the way that this offense is coming together, and I still think that this defense can be quite good. Things are looking up in BC. For Calgary, we'll do more on this probably later on in the week. It's just so clear it's not working here. Major changes are needed. I think the roster's bad. I think that it has been a very poorly constructed football team for a bit now. And I think Dave Dickinson is a really good coach, and I think he should probably just stick to that. And that's that. I think you have to make some major changes in Calgary because it's not working, and you are falling farther and further and further behind right now. In Saskatchewan, the Riders get in, clinching a playoff spot this week. It's not perfect, but Corey Mace has done something that we talked about around these parts for a bit. He needed to change the culture out in Saskatchewan, and boy, howdy did he with a really good job coaching this year. And now it looks like Saskatchewan could be getting a home playoff game. We'll see how the last couple of weeks of this regular season play out. But big stuff happening in Saskatchewan. I think Corey Mace deserves a ton of credit for what he has done. And now, like, I know I just said every team in the West, oh boy, dangerous. I do think Saskatchewan is kind of the least dangerous of all of them. But I do think with that defense, they are going to be a problem. And with the turnovers that they're able to face, the pressure they're able to get on the quarterback, that they have so many weapons offensively that this is... The West playoffs are going to be really... The whole playoffs, I think, are going to be really interesting. Although the East does feels like it's kind of fallen off after a great start this year. Toxic. PK low-key likes to shit on the Stamps as a Rider fan. Look, I gave the Stamps all their flowers when they were going on that run. And I was saying... As someone who has cheered for a team who has existed for over 100 years and has 4 Grey Cup championships, runs like what the Stampeders have don't come around all that often. So, A, take advantage of it, and I don't think they did, but B, celebrate it, because it is going to turn at some point, and now it really has turned. And the thing is that, like, I don't take, I was going to say I don't take joy in seeing the Stampeders lose. I take some. Because I had to do sports reports while the Stampeders are beating the Riders in Saskatchewan in the postseason, and while the Stamps are 17-1 and riding off to Grey Cups, which they lose, and doing all of these things, and I just had to sit there and just be like, "Yep, no, they're doing it. On they go. Isn't that great?" So yeah, there's a little bit of me that's like, this is fine, but also it is. Like, when something is wrong, you have to call it out. And right now what's happening here is just, it's wrong, and it is bad. And it is potentially very damaging because this was a fan base that was kind of dwindling when things were going well. And so if the team's bad, that doesn't do a whole lot to grow the audience. I will say that for sure. So that is the quick story from the Canadian Football League as we head toward the postseason. But y'all know what I want to be talking about today. As the WWE put on another premium live event. It was Bad Blood from Atlanta, Georgia. Let's talk about it. Say this all the time. I need to make that one longer because your boy needed some water after yelling about the NFL for a minute, and now we need to get that one back. Need to extend that a little bit, but it is WWE Bad Blood went down this weekend from Atlanta, Georgia, and a lot of talking points coming out of it. So let's break it down, shall we? The night begins with Drew McIntyre against CM Punk, and I thought this was exactly what it needed to be. I thought it was an excellent Hell in a Cell match. I thought every bit of brutality kind of meant something. There wasn't a lot of egregious stuff just to be egregious, and I think we know what promotion I'm talking to when I say that. But I thought that they did a really good job of kind of stringing everything together, and it wasn't just a plunder match. It was a psychologically thought out Hell in a Cell match with still enough blood and violence to justify it. I thought that, again, it got across the seriousness of the stipulation and made Hell in a Cell feel like just an absolute badass thing that you really needed to worry about. and it makes it this like absolute playground of just violence and something that will change you for a bit. And I've said before, like, I know Crown Jewel is coming up, and I know it's getting into Survivor Series, which is getting into Royal Rumble, which is getting into WrestleMania. I think Punk and Drew have to sit it out for a bit. I think you have to sell the repercussions of this for a while and do video things or whatever vignettes you need to do. But I don't think you have these guys on TV, especially like it's easy to just like go away from them because Raw is going to 2 hours now. So it's easy to just kind of pivot from those guys and do something else and let them kind of sell the effects of the match that they were just in. And then I thought after, like Punk stumbling and needing the oxygen and all of that, I thought that was really, really good. And then also, I thought the commentary of that match, and for the most of the part of the show, I thought the commentary was phenomenal. I thought Cole and Graves did a good job of setting up, again, the severity of the match type that they were in and the aggressive nature that both guys were portraying. And I thought that they added to that match spectacularly. The only thing I will say about the commentary is that I do wish Wade Barrett was on the desk there. Not that there was anything really lacking, but just, again, because one of the things that I am always saying is you need to keep this brand split. And you need to, if you want to do this, you have to take it seriously. And Graves and Cole have amazing chemistry together, and they're awesome. And obviously, they follow the product and all of those things. But they are both the SmackDown guys. And so I do think you need the Raw dude there, at least to just lend a bit of the Raw voice so that it doesn't just seem like it's the SmackDown guy and then, well, it's not really, it's all WWE, and then all of it gets blurred and it doesn't work. So that's why I loved it when the initial brand split, they had the two different broadcast teams, and I understand you are limited with that when Joe Tessitore is doing college football or doing boxing or both. So that there is a limitation with that, and so I think the compromise is getting Wade Barrett on there, and it's a 3-man booth, and that's how you go about it. But that is the only knock. I thought it was really good. And then after that, we kind of dragged for a while, I thought. Bayley and Nia was all right. It wasn't amazing. It was good enough. Like, there wasn't anything awful about it, I didn't think. I thought it was fine. It definitely is setting up now Tiffany Stratton against Nia Jax, and I don't know if the crowd is overly enthused to be cheering for either of them there. So it's a weird spot, I think. But I do think part of this now sets up something interesting with Bayley, because they showed before that like they were up in the box, the luxury box, with the tag team champion, the women's tag team champions, and Naomi, the hosts for the evening, what hosting they did. But they did a thing where they were saying, like, okay, women's championship matchup next. Who do we got? Like, how's Bayley going to do? And Naomi's like, yeah, my girl Bayley, she's got this. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. Oh, Bianca, what do you think? She's definitely going to try hard. And there was a glare from Naomi, and I do think maybe we're setting up a tag team feud now with Naomi and Bayley going up against Bianca and Jade, and I think that could be interesting because this tag team division just needs some stories right now and needs some interest, and they're starting to get it a little bit with like the Kabuki Warriors and all of them, and they are getting it. They're trying, at least, with like Carter and Chance and the whatever they're calling the Sonya Deville group and all of them. But this would be a good one at the top to let the other ones kind of figure out what they are doing and building up their storylines. So I think that could be the pivot, and I think it could be really interesting. Priest against Balor was all right. It felt like Raw. It felt like a Monday Night Raw match. They did make Priest feel like a bit of a beast when he's going out there and everyone's running in and he's disposing of all of them and crushing them, and then he ends up getting the win. So hopefully this was enough beating down of the Judgment Day to allow Priest to go off and do something else. I think there needs to be a touch of a remake with him. You can't get too far away from the character that he is, but all of it still screams Judgment Day. And because that is the group that he is closely associated with, not just because of recency, but also like it's the biggest thing he has done in this company. And so I think that there needs to be just a slight little retool of him so that it doesn't look so connected, because I do think you now need to separate the two. The group from the guy. Triple H comes out for a massive announcement, and it is the crown jewel where the The undisputed WWE champion is going to face the world heavyweight champion, and ditto on the women's sides as well. Neither title will be on the line, but the winners will be crowned the crown jewels of 2024. It is what it is. Like, it's not, at least when they said, groundbreaking announcement, it wasn't a thing that was teased for weeks and weeks as something that would change the industry, and then it was just kind of a bit of a, okay. It'll get a couple of interesting matches. It is curious that you would have two champions lose on big shows like that, but I think that there's an interesting storytelling device that can come with all of that. And so I think if done well, it is something that I think you can feel confident in and actually do quite a bit with. So I think there could be something there. It is something that is also, if it was the past regime running it, I think you would have some major concerns about how it was all being put together and how it was all being booked and all of that. But I think that this is a creative department now that gives you the confidence that they're going to be able to take this seriously and actually use it in a way that helps further a few things. So I think it could be interesting, but it doesn't necessarily have my interest peaked right now. It's like a lot of things in wrestling where you're doing it for the first time, so you have to really do it to make us take it seriously. And then the Gunther Goldberg stuff, it's fine. It was a Raw segment after that. I would imagine at some point we get some kind of Goldberg involvement in something and he comes back and there's a whatever, but yeah. Liv against Rhea, it was all right. It was mainly a stage for other storyline things to happen. And that was, like, you have the Hell in the Cell at the beginning. And then obviously you end the night with Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns in a tag team match, and The Rock comes out. So there are big things that happen on this show. But like 95% of this show felt like Raw or SmackDown. Like this did not feel like a premium live event. And I understand it is kind of a secondary one, but this, they had just enough on here to make it not skippable. And I am not going to tell WWE their shows need to be longer or anything like that, but getting into these rhythms where these are five match shows and a couple things on them that are going to happen, they're going to be interesting. The rest of it is just going to kind of be basically a souped up Monday Night Raw, and we're going to move forward with that. Like, I worry that these are coming a little skippable and not maybe meaning as much. And again, it's coming from an era where some of these shows were 4.5 hours and too much was jammed onto them, and we were trying to force everyone onto everything. And like, we're getting a world title match on Raw tonight. So you are still getting a lot of very good content, and it is making the weeks and the TVs feel special and all of that. But I do think we are taking away from some of these a little bit anyway. But yeah, Liv and Rhea, it was all right. It was about the story. Raquel Rodriguez comes out. It makes complete sense. She has history with both. She is a good kind of the Diesel to Liv Morgan's Shawn Michaels. It is a little on the nose with Camille and Mercedes Moné, but that's a thing that's been done in wrestling for 100 years. So I think this role fits Raquel better. I think that she is better suited as the big bully heel rather than just trying to be like the big smiling, oh man, boy, I'm really strong, aren't I? Babyface. Like, she seems like a legitimately nice person. It just hasn't been able to translate into a character that gets people invested. So what's the thing you do from that? Just pivot and be huge and terrifying. And she can do that. There's a thing now with her and Liv as a group. You have a ready-made storyline with all the different years of things that they did with Raquel and Rhea Ripley and how that can now grow. And then you still have a little Rhea Liv hanging over if you want to get to that at like a WrestleMania time or something like that. So it's a pairing that makes complete sense. And then the main event, it was Cody and Roman taking on Jacob Fatu and Solo, and there was the run-ins, and this Jimmy Uso is back, and we are all very excited about this. And there's the hug with Roman, and so we have now, and then The Rock comes out at the end. We have firmly started to now push this into high gear and get this storyline rolling as we push towards War Games in Vancouver, and then onward towards WrestleMania. And so the first seeds were planted here, and I am very excited to see where it goes. But yeah, for the most part, like, you have a blow-off match in Hell in a Cell, and then the rest of it all just kind of felt like we're advancing for something else. and the rest of it just felt like a really, really souped up Raw or SmackDown. So it was an enjoyable. Well, it ended up being close to 3 hours. It was an enjoyable show. I enjoyed it. I was entertained, but I did not come away from it thinking like, man, we just saw a premium live event. What a night for the WWE. Just like, yeah, this was fun. Can't wait to see what happens next, which I guess is episodic television, but it didn't feel like a big event by any stretch of the imagination. Shifting gears now, there is another, this one just straight up pay-per-view this weekend, as AEW brings Wrestledream to the Washington area once again. In the main event there, it is Bryan Danielson putting his career and championship on the line against Jon Moxley. And you're going to have this a little bit talking about, okay, is this the last ride for Bryan Danielson? And this is one, we kind of talked about it when they set it up, but this is one that you can kind of believe a little bit. Because from a storyline standpoint, makes all the sense in the world. Moxley was the guy, like these two were blood rivals. And then William Regal brought them together. And it ties everything into, like, it makes this, again, long-term storytelling. But it makes it, it puts a real nice ending on it. It's in Seattle. It's in Washington, sorry, which is his home area. He got the match against Nigel McGuinness, which is a big thing to check off before he kind of rides off into the sunset. And he is not retiring as a wrestler, just as a full-time wrestler, from what I understand. So you can still have him come back and do some of these things. If some of people's wild speculation is true that Shane McMahon is going to be the one who is behind Jon Moxley, it kind of kicks off this like NWO type of a thing that I'm assuming, will be trying to do with this group now. And so there is, I think, there's a lot of intrigue, and there's a lot of reasons why you can certainly talk yourself into Moxley winning and having this be the time. And so I am fascinated by that. The rest of the card, like, it looks like it's going to be some really, really fun stuff. The Young Bucks against Private Party, like, nothing about that has been set up in a way that I have found enjoyable or anything like that. Ricochet and Ospreay and Takeshita, I think, is going to be one of the more amazing matches you will see ever. And it's going to be an AEW pay-per-view. It's going to be insane. The in-ring quality is going to be nuts. And I think a couple stories are going to be wrapped up in some interesting ways. So I am genuinely looking forward to this pay-per-view on Canadian Thanksgiving weekend. One more big event happening this weekend is going to be a fight that we've been talking about around these parts for a real long time. The chance to start a classic rivalry in boxing. Let's talk about it. This weekend, Bivol, Beterbiev, the two best fighters in the light heavyweight division, finally clash and get to settle their score, whatever. Someone's has to go, and all of those sorts of things. But this is going to be one of, I think, the best fights of the year. You have two guys undefeated who are at the top of their game right now, facing off to see who is the best in this weight class. It does not get better than this. This isn't one, and maybe, like, could you have done it a couple of years, or maybe, but this feels like a legitimate super fight, and this feels like a big deal. And, like, no, these guys aren't the biggest names in the sport or anything like that, but they are like two genuine pound-for-pound fighters who are going to be fighting this weekend to unify some championships and figure out who the best in their weight class is. At the heart of this sport, that's what this is all supposed to be about. And so the storyline going into this weekend, it is simply just two of the best fighters in the world facing off. And if we are lucky as boxing fans, which a lot of times we aren't, but if we are lucky as boxing fans, this is a chance to set up potentially a classic rivalry, in my opinion. I think these are two guys who have the opportunity to go out and make an absolute statement on this stage about how good they are. And I think that the obvious, like we do the Friday after these big fights, we do fights to make after blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. The obvious one is to do these guys again, unless there is an absolute domination. I think that this is the start of a potentially classic rivalry that has the opportunity to really launch these guys into the mainstream. Bivol did it for a bit when he beat Canelo Alvarez, but that star has kind of faded a little bit. And so now this is a chance, I think, to really elevate both of these guys as real players in the sport of boxing. So this is a chance to really be a classic rivalry that puts both of these guys on the map, but it's also an opportunity. If one of these dudes wins in convincing, dominant fashion, it is a chance to put yourself into that pound for pound number one conversation with the Usyks and the Inoues and the Crawfords and all of those guys. And also, if we aren't doing an immediate rematch once this fight is done, one thing that we can do is set up a Canelo Alvarez fight. Because I do think, as frustrating as it is for all of us fans who want to see him against Beterbiev or whoever, this is still something that sticks in Canelo's backside and gets him very frustrated, is that he was really kind of outclassed at this weight class against Bivol, and he wants another opportunity at it. And so this is, I think, a chance not only to set yourself up for stardom based off of each other, but this is a chance, if there is a obvious conclusion, I think there's a way to grow it. And if there is some form of a pause there, then there is an opportunity for Canelo to come in and I think make even a bigger star out of this. So this feels like, for whoever wins this, the start of a gigantic star-making, money-making venture for them. And so, and honestly, the talents deserve it. So very interested to see what comes out of this fight this weekend. We're going to stick with the face punching. We're going to get into some UFC talk, as the Ultimate Fighting Championship had another pay-per-view this weekend. Let's talk about it. UFC 307 went down in Salt Lake City, Utah. And in the main event, Alex Pereira retains his UFC light heavyweight championship in a victory over Khalil Roundtree. And this was, and again, full disclosure, I did not see this fight. I haven't seen the fights yet. It was just, talked a bit about it before, but it was my anniversary this weekend. So, will be checking out these fights. Saw some clips, saw the scuttlebutt generally online and all of that, and saw a lot of talk about decisions. So not going to necessarily talk about those. But just here in the main event, Pereira with the knockout over Khalil Roundtree. And we knew what this was. This was not going to be a card or a show where like Pereira gets the win and it's like, oh my God, this guy is now, he beat who? Wow. This was him going to go out, take care of business and see what you can do. And Roundtree, from all accounts, kind of put a fear in him a little bit, marked him up, did all those things. But I do think that this is a guy that, this was one of the things we talked about, where all the stuff that Roundtree does well, Pereira does better. That does not mean that Roundtree is then just a bumbling idiot who can't do anything. Like, he is still talented, and he was still able to get some hits on him. But for Pereira now, this is another convincing win in a long line of them. And he has become such an important fighter in the UFC, and he has taken full advantage of every opportunity. He beat Israel Adesanya in one kickboxing fight, and he turned that into a few very big, very important fights in the UFC. It turned him into a champion, and he was able to pivot that into another fight where he lost, but he turned his championship win basically into a title opportunity, and then has taken that and ran with it. And because of certain things that have broken down, whether it was a fight at Madison Square Garden or UFC 300 or International Fight Week, things aren't going well, he has taken advantage of that. And he has, in 14 fights, rocketed into being one of the three most important fighters in the Ultimate Fighting Championship and a huge star. And so again, the conversation around what is next, it truly is whatever he wants. He is the big star in the division that for a long time has been the marquee division in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. I want to see him go up to heavyweight. I want to see him do it. I want to see him go where no one has gone before and try to win championships in 3 different weight classes. I think that would be amazing. And quite frankly, a lot of the other options at light heavyweight kind of look like this with Roundtree, where it's just like, okay, well, I guess we're doing this, but we're kind of just doing it so Pereira can win it, and so we can move on to some other fun stuff. Let's get to the fun stuff with this guy. Let's let a couple other contenders organically build up, and let's let Pereira go out and do the damn thing. He has turned into an absolute star, and we are at a point with this guy where why would you doubt him? What has he shown us to make us think that this isn't going to be a fighter who can go out and make history? So another big night for one of the biggest stars in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Much more UFC breakdowns coming up from this channel as the week goes along. One more thing before we put a bow on this show today. It is now time to continue our NBA previews as we get ready for the preseason games are starting, so the season's coming up soon. Let's continue the NBA previews. As we do these previews, everything I say, that there is a conviction behind it, right? Like, oh yes, these are going to be these are the five most talented teams in the league. These are the coaches that could get fired this year. These are the players that have the most pressure on them. All these different things. And that is what we're supposed to do in sports talk, right? Is we are supposed to have our takes and stick with them, and the hotter the better, and all of those sorts of things. But I'm human enough to admit, sometimes there's some shit I'm worried I'm wrong about. And so today, as we kind of reach the halfway point of the NBA previews here, going to be looking at what I'm worried I'm wrong about this year with the NBA. So number 5, I am worried that I might be wrong on how everything fits with the Dallas Mavericks. We had this conversation a little bit about Toxic was in on the chat asking about like how do we think Clay fits on this Dallas Mavericks team, and I think it fits really well. I think you have a full year with Gafford in Washington coming back from that trade. And I think you have Clay, who now is going into a role where he is not going to have to be the be-all, end-all superstar of this and be just be corner 3 guy over there. Just do that. And we will be more than happy. And then you have Luka with off of this championship, run close to a championship, hopefully motivated and all of that. I feel like these pieces fit so well together. But we have been fooled by that before with some of these teams, and with some veterans. Like there is a world where like Luka was just kind of beaten down by that long of a run and having to carry things, and maybe it isn't quite as good, and the supporting staff doesn't help out as much as maybe we think, and the fact that this team doesn't defend at all really comes back to bite them, and Clay is just cooked. Like some of these things could happen, and all of a sudden my good feelings about Dallas could just go away, and so that's why I'm a little worried I'm wrong about them, but I'm at number 5 because I'm not super worried about that. And number 4, I'm a little worried I might be wrong about Atlanta just being bad. It wasn't a fit with Murray. So Trae Young now has the team back to himself. And I have great concerns about that. I have great concerns about the rest of the roster. And I do not think that this is a good basketball team. And so I will be able to, plausible deniability, the whole year, I'll be able to explain it away, much like Walt was with the Commanders earlier. It's like, yeah, who are they beating? Because the Eastern Conference in the NBA is in a downswing right now. There's obviously some talented teams at the top, but it gets ugly quick. And so there are, I think, a number of wins out there for Atlanta to steal. And so we may not even get a good sense of if this is a good basketball team or not, based off of the lack of competition that there could be in the East. And so I am worried that the results are going to be there, even if the team is bad. Also, like, there's a chance that maybe now Young matures coming off of this experience with Murray and grows into a better basketball player. Or with no Murray there's other opportunities for some of these players to rise up and take full advantage, or something. Either way, I am a little bit worried that I think Atlanta may be better than I think they are. But again, that's at 4. At 3, the Rockets' young players development, and that is going to be a theme for a couple of these next ones here, is that one of the lessons we took from last year is that some of these kids coming into this league now are so good that when it hits, it really hits. And so instead of bad lottery team gets good player helps bad lottery team, but only a little bit. And now, they've gone from 22 wins now to 30. And now they've gone up to 39. And now they're a bit above 500 and they're a 7 seed. And now they're competing for an NBA championship. Minnesota skipped a couple of those steps with Ant, right? SGA helped Oklahoma City skip a couple of those steps. And so I am now thinking that the Rockets players can help these guys step, because there's like 3 or 4 of them on that team that you think might be able to take those steps. But that is entirely projection based, right? Like the first 2 in the worried I'm wrong about, Dallas, I'm worried that they might not still be a good team. Well, last time we saw them, they were a good team. Atlanta, I'm worried that I might be wrong that I think they're bad. Well, last time we saw them, they were a bad team. This one, we are now projecting into how these young athletes adapt to life in the NBA and how does it fit with Fred VanVleet and with Udoka as the coach and all of that. So I'm a little worried that I might be going a bit ahead of myself on the Rockets. Number 2, the Bridges and now Towns fit on the Knicks. Admittedly, when I prepped this, that was not a... the Towns part of this was not an option. He could not fit well on this team because he wasn't on this team. But now I still look at this as a really well-built roster and a team that just kind of fits perfectly together. And so I am worried that I am wrong on that you have Towns, who came from being the guy in Minnesota and now potentially being the 3rd guy on the Knicks with a coach who he didn't really mesh with the first time, and a team that isn't going to give him the ball a ton. You go with Bridges from a situation with the Nets where who else was going to get the ball and score? So he was able to do all of these great things. And then you have Brunson, who is actually the guy there and is someone who has stepped up in gigantic ways. I think all of it will fit, but there is a long track record of A, this not working, and B, it not working in New York, where every time we think, okay, well, yeah, it's Amari and Melo. How can they go wrong? Oh, that's how they can go wrong. I see it now. But it does feel like this team is built really well. I do worry that it's going to take too long to mix, or it's just not going to mix at all, and things could fall off. So that's one thing I'm worried about. But the number one thing I am worried about this year is my assumption that Wemby moves into MVP caliber territory already, and thusly carries the Spurs into the postseason. They are the number 1 team I am focused on for making a big jump this year, and it is entirely based off of that very large Frenchman that is on their team. And they went out and acquired Chris Paul. I think they've done a lot of really, really smart moves to build around this kid. It is not perfect yet, though. And so that is where my concern comes in, is that I just think Wemby's going to be amazing. And he can get hurt. We had 1 year where he didn't, so now we're assuming that he's never going to. And that absolutely could happen, and it would suck. But he could get hurt, and it would be very devastating for this team. Or even if he takes a gigantic step, he still isn't enough to carry what is, aside from like Chris Paul and a couple of other guys, a fairly flawed roster. So I am worried that I am maybe wildly overestimating what could happen with the San Antonio Spurs this year. All right, that is going to do it for this show today. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Again, close to an hour and a half. Thank you all so much for hanging out. Coming up later on today, going to be doing another Calgary Flames video game stream as we react to whatever Peltier news comes down and whatever the next little bit is, plus continue our rebuild of that team. The gaming stream is going to be at 2 o'clock today. 2 p.m. Mountain Time is going to be the start for that one. So tune in for that. And then tomorrow, going to be back doing the podcast live at noon. The schedule is staying the same for a little bit. I will explain why there might be some changes on Friday coming up in a little bit. Not sure what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not allowed to say. But there could be a few changes coming soon, but for the most part, I'm going to try to keep everything the same, at least for now. So thank you guys so much for hanging out and for tuning in, and I will talk to all of you guys later on today. Have a great next couple of hours.